Hi everyone, I'm Gary Null. It's nice to have you with us today. From Northwest and A&amp University, published in the FASEB Scientific Journal, green tea can help ameliorate memory impairment and brain insulin resistance and obesity. That's terrific. There's a chemical in green tea, it's called catechin 3-gallate. But it's extremely important. It has anti-cancer benefits, but now we're realizing it can help your memory. It can help you if you have let's say, a high-fat, high-protein diet. It can prevent a lot of diseases. So that's good news. Also today, we're going to hear from some individuals, including a Dr. Rashid Buttar. He's from New Zealand, and he's saying that some strange things are happening in New Zealand. Okay, what? And how does it impact us? It's about COVID. Then there was a major press conference. A whole lot of board-certified MDs, MD Ph.D s, regular doctors, none holistic, but they all came together because they felt that the way the war on COVID-19 is progressing is wrong, that there are proven drugs, FDA approved, that could help with the upper respiratory tract infections and literally cure these patients, inexpensive drugs, and they're being fought. In fact, their press conference was taken down off all social media. Why? Why, when these are responsible individuals who collectively have treated tens of thousands of patients and saved lives, why can't they have a forum and their freedom of speech be protected? But it's not. You can only have your free speech promoted and protected if you're on the right side of the woke movement. And that means the corporate Democrats, unfortunately. And it's not that the corporate Republicans are any better. They've engaged in their own censorship and attacks. So we're going to listen to what some of them have to say today. It's this short segment. The press conference is almost 3 hours long. We're taking one clip. If time permits, I'll also share with you the latest on connecting with your inner healer. Now, this is a very powerful short lecture. The lecture is actually 2 hours long, but I broke it into 15-minute segments, and I'll play one of those segments at a time when we really need it. And if time permits, from history.com, When America Despised the Irish. Remember that this current effort should not be about just African Americans or the history of racism against them. That is real, and that for all of us who've been a part of the humanistic, spiritual, and progressive movements, we have devoted a lot of our time and energy to trying to stop it and to give people opportunities, which is happening. But you can't just eliminate all individuals who are racist, and also the way that it's being done should be done peacefully and with a third party. Gerald Celente, whose program precedes mine on this day, he's an extraordinarily wise person. I always enjoy going up to Kingston to hang out with Gerald. We generally film him, or I'm there to support his efforts, because he's one of those rare individuals who has fire and passion in what he says, but listen to the words. He is accurate. And we need third parties. We need a breakaway from the corporate Republican and Democrat machine and the people that control that machine, the Council on Foreign Relations, Bilderberg's Trilateral Commission, the Business Roundtable, the American Legislative Exchange Council, and all the special interest groups behind it. We need truly independent people who can address this. But what I'm going to do today, if time permits, I'm going to show you that over a period of time, hundreds of years, almost all groups that migrated to the United States were ended up being attacked through bigotry and racism, and they suffered. And so I'm just going to show you some of the groups over the upcoming weeks. I'm going to show you what the people, the those who came in from Germany, from Ireland, from Spain, from China, Japan, Poland. Katanning, Pennsylvania was a Polish coal mining town. And when I was working there, managing a Singer sewing machine company at the very beginning of my career out of college, the individuals all had ancestry going back almost 100+ years. And they told me the story about how their ancestors came over here and they'd just have a card on their chest, pinned to their chest, the town that they had to go to. And then there'd be straw bosses or people working for the mining companies or mills who would be there when the trains came, put them in some really bad housing with a lot of other people. And then those people were expected to work between 12 to 16 hours a day. And frequently they came alone because they couldn't bring their family to such an environment until they'd gotten up on their feet, which might take 10 to 20 years. So let us realize that most people suffered in different degrees by different measures, and there are differences between chattel slavery and slavery where you have no opportunity, you have no freedoms, you're just a commodity. It's all bad, but then there are levels of bad and suffering. So I'm going to talk about this to show you that we can spread suffering around to a lot of different groups. And therefore, we should all be working together so that no individual group or ethnicity is attacked, isolated, exploited again in the future, as has happened in the past. But we don't have unity today. We have divisiveness. So we'll address that as well. I know we have a couple people called in. We'll try to take those calls as well. We begin with the latest on health and healing. And it's always good when you see one more study out of thousands, tens of thousands on green tea. Now, there's two ways of taking your green tea. You can take them in capsules, so you get the exact amount that you're looking for. Or you can brew tea, in which case you don't know exactly how much you're getting. But I suggest maybe a combination of the two. I always take my tea 3 bags at a time, and don't put it in boiling water, but hot water. Let it steep slowly over about a half hour. Or if it's outside, you can make sun tea, which is kind of fun. You put your water into a clean, let's say, gallon container, put your tea in, and then just let the sun heat it up. Now, where a lot of people live in Florida, Texas, Nevada, for example, Arizona, Southern California, it can easily reach 100 degrees. Well, if that's outside for an hour, you come back, it's all diffused, and then you have a really powerful concoction. You can throw in some probiotics and some prebiotics, and then some Manuka honey and some lemon juice, and now you got something really nice to cool you down after a good workout. So anyhow, this study shows that if you take green tea, it can help you with your memory if you have memory impairment and brain insulin resistance. That's especially important if you're diabetic or overweight. So this is the latest study on that. One more reason to add that to your overall preventative profile. From the University of Warwick, and Warwick is in the United Kingdom, comes a study about medieval medicine had remedies that could provide new treatments for modern-day infections. What are we talking about? We're talking about antibiotic resistance is an increasing battle for scientists to overcome as more antimicrobials are urgently needed to treat biofilm-associated infections. However, scientists from the School of Life Sciences, University of Warwick, say research into natural, non-toxic antimicrobials could provide candidates to fill the antibiotic discovery gap. Why is this important? Well, bacteria can live in two ways: as individual planktonic cells or as multicellular biofilm. Now, biofilm helps protect bacteria from antibiotics, making them much harder to treat. And one such biofilm that is particularly hard to treat is those that infect diabetic foot ulcers. Now, researchers at the University of Warwick, Dr. Harrison and others, have looked at natural remedies for the gap in the antibiotic market, and they did a paper, and the paper says anti-biofilm efficacy of a medieval treatment for bacterial infection requires the combination of multiple ingredients, and this was published in the peer-reviewed Science Reports just today. So the team started back in 2015. It's interdisciplinary, meaning there's microbiologists, chemists, pharmacists, data analysts, all working together. And what they found is they built on previous research from the University of Nottingham on using medieval remedies to treat MRSA. And MRSA is deadly, killing thousands of people every year. And almost all these people have weakened immune systems. So they looked at a 1,000-year-old medieval remedy, and what did it contain? Onions, garlic, wine, and bile salts. It's commonly known in folk medicine as Bald's eye salve, B-A-L-D'-S, eye salve. And it showed to have promising antibacterial activity. Well, yesterday I talked about the antibacterial properties of garlic and of onion, extremely beneficial. And what they found is that that it's a very positive remedy for gram-negative and gram-positive pathogens in the planktonic culture. So you're dealing with a common respiratory infection, bacteria called Stenotrophomonas, and so Staphylococcus aureus, that's Staphylococcus epidermidis. These are all staphylococcuses, and they're hard to kill. This was able to do that. So, and all those bacteria are found in the biofilms that infect diabetic foot ulcers. And by the way, ozone can also help diabetic foot ulcers. And packing it first by cleaning it properly, the wound, and then putting in colloidal silver, and then Manuka honey can also make a difference. So, good to know that they're looking back at the best from history and then testing it. Also, from the University of Bath, by the way, Bath is a beautiful, beautiful historical town in Great Britain. They did a study from the university, published in the Lancet Psychiatry Journal, found that the first clinical trial of its kind studies whether the cannabidiol could help treat cannabis use disorder compared to a placebo. Now, we know that prescription medication for cannabis extract, which is called cannabidiol, B-I-D-I-O-L, or CBD, is safe for daily use in treating cannabis use disorder and could help people to cut down on cannabis use. Now, this is a little confusing. Why? Because some people are so good at filtering what is said and what is heard that their subconscious rearranges the context of what is said to justify or rationalize their preconditioned mindset. I'll give you an example. I believe that all drugs should be, all of the different types of drugs people could take, like cannabis, for example, should be decriminalized. I believe the entire war on drugs is a fraud. It's led to hundreds of thousands of preventable deaths, hundreds of billions of dollars being earned by criminal syndicates who do not contribute to society. And it's kind of interesting because I was doing a spiritual retreat, meaning I just go off in the woods with just some water, no food. I fast with just water for about a week, sometimes longer. And then when I've rebalanced my own energy so I can continue to share it with people, I come back. And this particular time it was up in Flagstaff, the woods north of Flagstaff, which is where that's the highest point up in Arizona. And at the bottom is Phoenix, that's way down. And then in the middle, between Phoenix and Flagstaff, you have Sedona. Small community. I think, at least when I was there, around 13,000 people. Very pretty. And you can drive through it in like 8 or 9 minutes. And so coming back, and there's some photographs of me up there, and you'll see the wildfires off in the background, but you'll see me up in a pasture because I spent a couple of days just sitting in a pasture. And some people came by and asking what I was doing, and I talked to them, and they took a picture, so you got the picture. Anyhow, I stopped off because I saw a sign that says organic restaurant, and there's photographs of that also on my site. And a person said, aren't you Gary Null? Yes. Says, well, you got a lot of fans here in Sedona. Do you have time to do a little impromptu lecture? And I knew I had to get back to Phoenix because I was going to miss a flight, but then I said, okay, I'll take a flight in the morning. And so that afternoon, just visiting, I was driven around by the former mayor who showed me all the interesting spots where they filmed a lot of the Western movies. That was his father's ranch. Very nice man. He also told me all the problems that we're having with drought. And but then we got on the topic of drugs, and I said, Sedona is one of the heaviest users of marijuana per population in the United States. He's yes, and then we talked about the town that was just 20 minutes or so below Sedona, that was where the drugs were brought into, and then they were distributed to people in Sedona, had a very high crime rate. So that evening, when there was an impromptu get-together, and the only place I could find was, I believe it was a church, and there was no air conditioner or fans. It was hot. And it was packed. Sitting on the floor, there was no room left. A nice group of people. And they were asking me health questions, and then when I finished answering their health questions, I brought up the subject of how many people in this room are here because you feel this is like a spiritual oasis. It's no longer the extremely hyperkinetic and highly toxic energy of a major city. And all the hands went up, and I said, and do you feel that you're actually practicing spiritually your life? Yes. I said, well, this afternoon when I was driving around, I met a lot of homeless people. I mean, one was just a block from here, probably still there. I probably spoke with about 15 homeless people today, and because I'm doing a program on Poverty, Inc., I was doing the movie Poverty, Inc. at that time, I said, I'm always interested in how a person got to where they're out and no longer have a house or home. And I said, well, do the people here help? Oh, no. They bring you food? Anyone bring you bedding, anything? No. Nothing at all? Anyone invite you to come in? Nope. Conversations? Nope. So I said, yeah, if you're really spiritual, you got to see these people. Why wouldn't you want to help them? There was just dead silence. And one of the people then commented about, oh, we didn't want to hear you talk about that. We wanted nutrition. I said, okay. I said, well, here's one more question. You answer this, I'll be happy to spend the next hour or two continuing. And I'd already talked for an hour and a half. I said, how many people in here smoke marijuana? And all the hands went up. And I said, okay. I said, that's your right. And I believe that we should have no law that prevents you from smoking that. It should be legalized. But it isn't. And at that time, nowhere. And I said, so you are aware that for you to get your marijuana, it has to come through this town near you. And to get there, it has to come out of generally Mexico, though it's grown in the Blue Mountains of Jamaica, etc. And over 150,000 people just in Mexico have been killed, frequently by decapitation, but also the 7 different drug cartels send a warning to people by stuffing them live into a 55-gallon drum of acid, and so they take several minutes before they're eaten alive. While they're still alive, they're conscious that they're dying. And then they're chopped up. I said, do you take any responsibility for that? Again, there was silence. And I said, well, when you can realize that the end use of a product means others have had to suffer or die for you to have that product, and you refuse to be responsible for it just in its use, then maybe we should rethink the idea of what it is to be spiritual. Anyhow, afterwards, a very nice couple come up and we spoke, and they owned a little little resort just below and asked would I stop off there the next day, and I did. It was really run down. I felt sorry for him. Yeah, it was just a mess. But they said, boy, after you left last night, there was a lot of angry talk, And I said, well, I wasn't there to shame anyone. I was just there to hold a mirror up that if you're going to do something, understand the larger context of what you're doing. So if you're eating a hamburger, can you look in the eyes of the cow that it came from? Or let's say 100 cows, the meat could be ground up for one hamburger. Not that one hamburger comes from 100 cows, but 100 cows' meat can go into making one hamburger. Like one glass of milk might have the milk from 1,000 cows. And I said, when you have your veal parmesan, do you look in the eyes and see the sadness of that little calf that's never had a chance to suckle from its mother and is intentionally deprived of iron so that it will have whitish meat? No. So how together are we? We're only to a point where we engage in our own narcissistic, selfish, self-interested life without any concern about the consequences of our actions on others or the planet. So that's why I'm not optimistic about anything at this moment, because I don't see that desire for unity, the desire for forgiveness, the desire to implement programs of cooperation and conciliation. Instead, I see every person for themselves, and everybody's angry about something, but let's not really address what we should be angry at in a constructive way. Turn your anger into a positive outcome. There are small groups, probably 5% of the people, which is about 18 million people. That's no small number of people who are now really moving to intentional communities, giving up these bad habits, because they are bad, and stopping to pollute the planet and being conscientious. They wouldn't vote Democrat. No one that I know who's conscious would vote Democrat or Republican. And because they're far more conscious of the crimes against humanity that have been committed by all these people, from President Barack Obama and Bill and Hillary Clinton and George Bush and George Bush Sr. and Ronald Reagan and, of course, Trump. So then the question is, did any of these people make a concerted effort to legalize cannabis completely versus making stronger prison sentences? And now there's the rub. Clinton's stronger, longer prison sentences. Obama, stronger, longer prison sentences. Joe Biden, stronger, longer prison sentences. It's just amazing what happens when you have a modern-day P.T. Barnum that brings on the freak show without realizing that what you're seeing is all illusion. Watch what they do. That's who they are. And we're afraid to do that, because then what if we put our energy and trust in someone that has not shown by action and deed they deserve it? And that's also true for journalists. Of all the journalists who promoted the war on Iraq, weapons of mass destruction, and the bombing and destruction of Libya and of Syria and the destabilization of Venezuela and other countries, well, why should we ever believe anything they say? They've engaged in genocide, intentionally. So if a person's going to smoke marijuana, understand you're poisoning yourself. All the scientific literature proves that. Just do your homework. But if that marijuana is extracted and a particular type of oil is extracted from it and purified, so it's no longer psychoactively viable, but it's medicinally usable, then that should be used. And it's over 22,000 studies appear in the Library of Medicine's PubMed showing you all the research they've done on the cannabinoids, cannabinols, and all the different extracts, helping with seizures, helping with lung cancer, with astrocytomas, glioblastomas, all these different wonderful things. But why isn't that promoted? Because that's competing with pharmaceutical drugs. And the pharmaceutical industry controls the FDA, the CDC, the White House, the media. So you'll never hear a good story on that. Just something to think about. Because this is showing that you can have a substantial benefit of helping get off marijuana by using the CBD, which is a safe, non-psychoactive treatment for cannabis. getting off cannabis, I've had friends who've been on it, and 2 of them it destroyed their life. I mean, literally destroyed their life. For 40 years, one of my friends, named Wynn, could not give up cannabis. And his son, a wonderful guy who runs the surfing community in Hawaii, asked would I help. He flew in, and he lasted 1 hour. 1 hour. Because paranoid delusional psychosis is frequently a side effect, or is an effect, not a side effect, of smoking cannabis. And split. So that's what you should understand. So you got to parse what I'm saying so you understand its real meaning. And finally today, a pessimistic outlook on life is linked to a shorter life. This is from the Berghofer Medical Research Institute in Australia. And this is a new study that's found people who are strongly pessimistic, which is today, most people about the future are at the greatest risk of dying earlier than those who are not pessimists. So that's important. Now, the opposite also should bear evidence that when you have something to live for, and you have something greater than your pain or suffering or crisis, that allows you to survive. And the person we can thank for that insight was Viktor Frankl, Dr. Viktor Frankl. He survived 5 concentration camps, including Auschwitz, in World War II. And he said those who survived the concentration camps, more often than not, were people who had something they still believed in. So what do you believe in? You better believe in yourself. And you better believe in your capacity to grow, to change, to evolve, to allow the essential self out. Now, sometimes that takes being around the right support people. And more often than not, people we might be around might be contributing to our pessimism and not allowing us to get beyond it. So examine carefully the people in your life, the work you're doing, where you're living, and how you're using your freedom of choice, wisely or not. Because that will determine whether, I'm just a pessimist and okay, or yeah, there's a lot of problems and I don't intend to be impacted by them. I intend to protect my body's immune system using zinc and vitamin D and vitamin A and vitamin C and eating a healthy plant-based diet and exercising, de-stressing, getting plenty of sunlight. That's good. Or, what can I do? I'm stuck here. I'm all day on the computer. So I eat a pizza. Not good. One is a pessimist. The other is not. Break through from your crisis, or you break down. It's one or the other. So don't let your pessimism of what you cannot control you. By the way, wealthier men are more likely to develop high blood pressure. This is from the Hokkaido University Graduate School of Medicine, Japan. I'll talk about that in an upcoming program. In fact, there's a lot of conditions that wealthier, successful people suffer from. The average person doesn't. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to go to 2 back-to-back video clips. And because I want you to hear, the first one will be strange things are happening in New Zealand. By the way, Rashid Buttar, B-U-T-T-A-R, is a medical doctor, board certified, and he was one of the first to come forward and say that a lot of what we were being told about COVID-19 simply didn't bear evidence that was accurate. And then now yesterday we played the 60 Minutes piece, and we've done all the medical reviews showing that it's true. There is no such thing as a gold standard antibody test, and therefore all these tests are functionally useless. Until you have one that is accurate for everyone and only for COVID-19, you could be testing positive for a cold virus, a COVID virus. And that's the fact of it. So everything we're doing now has been a control. Why? Mandatory vaccines? Hundreds of billions of dollars in profits? Your guess is as good as mine. Back in a moment. Please stay with us.
I also had a conversation today with one of my patients from New Zealand who returned back to New Zealand a few weeks back. And some of you know that I'm a resident of New Zealand. I'm a permanent resident of New Zealand. I got my residency status between 2016 and 2018. Actually, I think I finished the requirements at the end of 2018. And was here back visiting my sons in February. But I also had a feeling something was getting ready to happen. And the reason I'd moved to New Zealand was to prevent my family from being exposed. Went through a divorce, unfortunately, but it's all been a blessing. And coming back with my youngest son, or coming back at that point, it didn't make any sense for me to be in New Zealand when everything was about to happen here. But it's interesting what's happening in New Zealand. There are only 2 countries in the world that allow for the pharmaceutical industry to actually advertise. And that is the United States and New Zealand. Now, some of you may have heard that Bill Gates is now in New Zealand as of a few weeks ago. And apparently so is Larry Page from Google. Now, why are they in New Zealand? Well, it becomes very interesting where you start seeing the current leadership, Jacinda, who's the Prime Minister of New Zealand. Her last name escapes me, but she has been a long-standing supporter and friend of Bill Gates and Melinda Gates, and has actually lectured at Microsoft apparently in the past, and is very, very close and intimate with them. Now, what's interesting is that there's when my patient went back to New Zealand, his name's Derek, and for his privacy, I won't say his last name, but we had a conversation this morning. And he apologized to me beforehand and said that, look, I don't know whether I stepped out of turn, but I happened to mention that you were my doctor, and there are a lot of people in New Zealand that are following you, and apparently they're fans of me and what I've put out to the media or in our philosophy of medicine. And one of those people that he mentioned to me that he happened to meet at a meeting is a new and upcoming leader of the New Zealand People's Party, which is a new party. And there's a lot of things going on in New Zealand that are very scary. And the reason I say that they're very scary is because, as you know, New Zealand has not had a breakout of the coronavirus issue. And when Derek got back to New Zealand, they were picked up at the airport. Basically, everybody gets off a plane, is picked up at the airport. They won't let anybody come into the country unless they're a resident, a permanent resident, or a citizen of New Zealand. And when you come in, when you get off the plane, they check your body temperature, and then they were putting people up in Auckland, and they quarantine everyone for 2 weeks, but they had run out of space to put people up in Auckland. So they got them, Derek and his brother, who had come all the way from New Zealand for treatment, put them in a bus along with a bunch of other people, and then took them to Rotorua, which is about 2 hours out of Auckland, south of Auckland. And then they were housed in a hotel, apparently, or something that was similar to a hotel, but they were greeted by military. And they were quarantined for 2 weeks. They were only allowed, get this, to have sunlight every other day for half an hour if they were lucky. They were allowed to walk out into a pen, like a dog run, for 30 minutes every other day, and they were given food that was not nutritious, and Derek said that it was mentally very, very difficult for 2 weeks. And if you did not take the nasal swab, then they would quarantine you for a month. Now, why am I sharing this? I'm sharing this because here's a country that has only a population of 4.5 million people. It has, interestingly, not had much of a COVID issue, but they locked the whole country down. And again, I want to talk about what we're really seeing. We're seeing an exponentially increasing rate of diagnostics showing positive for COVID-19, despite the real-time PCR testing, the RT-PCR testing, not being an appropriate testing methodology that would actually indicate anything that was viable. Dr. Gary Null, who developed the RT-PCR in the 1980s, who won the Nobel Peace Prize for this, actually said that you cannot use the RT-PCR testing for diagnosing a viral or bacterial or any other infectious type of pathology. But yet that's what we're doing. And remember, what the RT-PCR is picking up is fragments of DNA or RNA. And in order to do that, you amplify the test. And what that basically means is that if you test and you don't see it, you can amplify it, so it's like a greater order of magnitude, more sensitive. And if you amplify something enough times, you will find that particular small fragment of DNA or RNA in every living system, leave alone humans, in every living system. So remember, they're looking for fragments of DNA or RNA. So if you amplify it and you shorten it, instead of, a sequence of 23 amino acids or 23 codons, you can get down to like 2 or 3 things. Well, those 2 or 3 things that you're looking for, if it's amplified enough, you will see that in every living species. Leave alone just humans, you'll find it in everybody, in everything. And so the RT-PCR is not an appropriate test, but that's what they were using. And when they're using that right now, they're seeing this exponential rise in diagnosis, but the death rate is exactly the same as it's been. So in actuality, when you take the number of people that are being diagnosed and you compare that and divide that by the number of people dying, you actually see that the death rate is decreasing. It's becoming less and less dangerous. So they're finding everybody that's positive. I know people that have had 3 tests done, all 3 tests are negative, but they're listed as positive. Or recently there was a motorcycle death and they've had that listed as COVID-19. A guy here in Charlotte who was a pretty well-known person who owned a restaurant. He died of heart disease. He had an 80% blockage of one of his heart vessels. He had a heart attack. He died, and they listed him as COVID-19. I've already shared with some of you my friend in Atlanta, Sam, whose neighbor has a 17-year-old son who committed suicide. They listed him as COVID-19 death. And there's so many other cases like this. These are just the ones that I'm personally aware of, 1 degree of separation from me. So we know that the reporting of death with COVID-19 is just going higher and higher and higher, but the death rate is flat. It hasn't changed. And so if you start looking at the rate of death, it's something like 99.74% of the people that would get COVID-19 survive. 99.74. So only 0.26% of people that are dying, supposedly, are dying from this COVID issue. And in actuality, that's with their comorbidities. If you were to actually look at the people that didn't have any comorbidity, well then, I don't think you'd see many people that have died at all. In fact, the president of the Bulgarian Pathology Association said that nobody has died of COVID-19. They haven't been able to establish anybody that's died from COVID-19. Now, if you start looking at the people that, like these younger people that have supposedly died, there was an interview, and I'll probably be releasing it on our social media in the next couple of days. There was a video that showed an interview where the mainstream media was talking to a doctor about some of these COVID-19 deaths, apparently, and one of them, two of those deaths, they were people that were in their 20s. And so the news reporter asked, did they have any comorbidity? And the doctor responded, well, one died of a motorcycle accident. And the reporter said, wait a second, what do you mean motorcycle accident? He said, well, it's possible that the motorcycle accident was caused because the person had COVID-19. It was the most absurd thing. So anyway, again, the point is more and more, the diagnosis, everybody's showing positive, and yet the death rate is exactly the same, which shows that there's nothing to worry about. And guys, I'm just here to tell you that 99.9% of the population in this planet has already been exposed to COVID-19, okay? It's no different than a common cold. And they have shut down the entire world economy, and I've put out some recent posts as to why. Why are they lying to us? Why are they doing this? Well, there is an agenda. We've talked about it before, and I'll let you go on to some of the other social media platforms and see this, but it all comes down to mandatory vaccines.
We share these stories because we feel an obligation to speak out, and we've been asked over and over when people hear this information why we didn't speak out sooner or why more doctors aren't speaking out. So we just want to share with you the pressure that doctors are under to toe a particular line that's being told to us. There is real professional and personal costs to not doing, not following the group think, and we just want to share that experience with you. And as we just heard, one of our own doctors wasn't able to get a medication that he thought could potentially be life-saving for his own father, a medication that you can just pick up off the shelves in much of the world, which is really very sad. I don't know what you would have done if he had been COVID positive and you had that information. It's just terrible. Anyway, there's many ways to silence physicians, so we're going to hear from our next colleague, Dr. Tudaro.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Dr. James Tudaro. I'm a residency-trained ophthalmologist, and I've been deeply investigating COVID-19 since about February of this year, and really took on, I'd say, a much more central role after co-authoring, I guess, the first widely disseminated paper on hydroxychloroquine as a potential treatment for COVID-19. Many of you may have heard this document. It was the one that was tweeted out by Elon Musk, his 34 million followers, and then just a few days after the president was talking about hydroxychloroquine to the nation. Since then, we know that there's been a substantial amount of evidence now showing hydroxychloroquine to be not just safe, which we already knew, but also effective. And there are many ongoing clinical trials still today. Yet if you were to try to read that original document that we published, you wouldn't be able to. After millions of views, about a week after it's published, Google took it down for violating its terms of service. And it's still down to this day. A couple months later, I wrote another article called The Study Out of Thin Air. This was the article about the Lancet study that was published discrediting hydroxychloroquine. It was kind of a little bit of a deep dive into Surgisphere, which was what we know now is a shell corporation that provided this, it's a most likely fabricated data set. There were reports that people messaged me saying that Facebook continually took down the link to the article. And later, they allowed the link because it turned out to all be true, of course, and that study was formally retracted just a couple days later. This degree of censorship is happening to not just physicians, but people everywhere on social media platforms. We have the CEO of YouTube who openly stated that anything that was said on YouTube that was against the advice of the World Health Organization, which we all know has made a number of mistakes throughout this pandemic, would be subject to censorship. We know that Mark Zuckerberg said the similar thing on Facebook. And, this is incredible, and it kind of goes to what Dr. Erickson was talking about earlier about the American Republic. Because with the pandemic, with the fear of this pandemic, in the matter of just weeks, with mandated stay-at-home laws, with rules against public gatherings, we really lost the right to peaceably assemble. So people naturally go to social media platforms, even more so than before, to communicate with one another, to get messages out and learn. And then we're censored there, eroding our ability to have free speech. And so what we've seen is, in the matter of just a couple weeks, really some of the most fundamental rights of the American Republic being taken away from us. And I think it's incredibly important for Americans to resist the loss.
Okay. Mind you, he was one of many, many doctors, regular board-certified physicians, not controversial, who said that there are medications that are working. In fact, 3 separate physicians who did not know each other all said the same drug that they were using was curing their patients. One had an inhaler, steroid inhaler, which had been used for children, and 100% cure. These are $20 for a treatment, and the whole regimen was $200, and yet the media is supporting, with Anthony Fauci and the Gates Foundation, the drugs that are coming at $3,000 a treatment. I'm going to quote you something from Dr. Harvey Reich, MD, Ph.D., Professor of Epidemiology, Yale School of Public Health. And this is just what he said in his own words. Quote, as professor of epidemiology at Yale School of Public Health, I've authored over 300 peer-reviewed publications and currently hold senior positions on the editorial boards of several leading journals. I'm usually accustomed to advocating for positions within the mainstream of medicine. So I've been challenged to find that in the midst of a crisis, I'm fighting for a treatment that the data fully support, but which, for reasons having nothing to do with a correct understanding of the science, has been pushed to the sidelines. As a result, tens of thousands of patients with COVID-19 are dying unnecessarily. Fortunately, the situation can be reversed easily and quickly. I'm referring, of course, to the medication hydroxychloroquine. When this inexpensive oral medication is given very early in the course of illness, before the virus has had time to multiply beyond control, it has shown to be highly effective, especially when given in combination with the antibiotics, doxycycline, and the nutritional supplement zinc. On May 27th, I published an article in the American Journal of Epidemiology entitled Early Outpatient Treatment of Symptomatic High-Risk COVID-19 Patients That Should Be Ramped Up Immediately as Key to the Pandemic Crisis, end quote. That article, published in the world's leading epidemiology journal, analyzed 5 studies demonstrating clear-cut and significant benefits to treated patients, plus other very large studies that showed the medication safety. Physicians who have been using these medications in the face of widespread skepticism have been truly heroic. They have done what the science shows is best for the patients, often at great personal risk. I myself know of 2 doctors who have saved the lives of hundreds of patients with these medications, but are now fighting state medical boards to save their licenses and reputations. The cases against them are completely without scientific merit. Since publication of my May 27th article, 7 more studies have demonstrated similar benefit. In a lengthy follow-up letter also published in the American Journal of Epidemiology, I discussed these 7 studies and renew my call for the immediate early use of hydroxychloroquine in high-risk patients. These 7 studies include an additional 400 high-risk patients treated by Dr. Vladimir Zelenko with 0 deaths. 4 studies totaling 500 high-risk patients treated in nursing homes and clinics across the U.S. with no deaths, 0 deaths. A controlled trial of more than 700 high-risk patients in Brazil with significantly reduced risk of hospitalization and 2 deaths among 334 patients treated with hydroxychloroquine, and another study of 398 matched patients in France, also significantly reduced hospitalization risk. Since my letter was published, even more doctors have reported to me their completely successful use. And so, again, this is a mainstream, highly respected, one of the country's most respected epidemiologists, Professor at Yale, and publishing over 300 scientific peer-review articles, and yet you wouldn't know it. Instead, the entirety of the mainstream media has attacked hydroxychloroquine. In fact, The Lancet did what was supposed to be the death knell, and it turned out the article they published was fraudulent, and it had to be retracted. So, we're sharing the truth with you. Use that drug as one, along with zinc, and the protocols are using, and the protocols are in these articles, but nobody wants to use these in the mainstream because they're waiting on that $3,000 to $6,000 drug that's coming, and the vaccines. So just want to share that with you. Going to take a couple calls in a moment. Your chance to call in and share your opinion. Our talk back at 888-874-4888. 888-874-4888. Back in a moment. Please stay with us. Nice to have you with us, everyone. I'm Gary Null. I'm going to give you some updates on the person who was quoted as an expert in the 60-minute piece, Dr. Margaret Hamburg. I'll show you what could have been found out about her had they done their homework. But first, it was in December of 2019 that we ran out of our ultimate anti-aging formula. It was one of our most popular products. The trouble is it's got a lot in it, and we had a hard time getting the ingredients. Then came COVID, and for the last 4 months, ingredients for all of our products have been hard to find. Now we're finally getting in almost all of our products, and we just got in this today. So as of today, I'm going to offer you a phenomenal special. In fact, it's such a phenomenal special, the package costs over $200, and you're going to get it for $109.99. You're going to save $93.85. It's a $204 package. Here's what you're getting, just so that you can see that it's a product that really is important. It's called the Ultimate Anti-Aging Formula, and it has the nutrients that I believe, how can I say this? It has the nutrients that I believe really can make a difference in our bodies, that I believe everybody should have. But let me tell you what they are. 500 in each serving. you're getting 500 milligrams, the finest vitamin C, 200 units of vitamin E, 15 milligrams of vitamin B1, B2, and B6, plus pantothenic acid. You're getting vitamin B3, vitamin B12, 500 micrograms, folic acid, biotin, calcium, magnesium in equal amounts, L-carnosine, turmeric, 200 milligrams, resveratrol, 100 milligrams, coenzyme Q10, 100 milligrams, NAD, DH, 20 milligrams, pine bark extract, pycnogenol, 20 milligrams, PPQ, 10 milligrams. I mean, these are superstars. So this way, you're getting a full spectrum of the nutrients that if you read any of those nutrients and you went to the scientific literature and looked under aging, just Google NADH, coenzyme Q10, resveratrol, turmeric extract, L-carnosine, pine bark extract, and PPQ. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 superstars in the anti-aging field. And you'll think, wow, all that in one serving? Yes. Now you know why it's one of our most popular items. So you get that, all right? But then you get more. This is the whole ultimate anti-aging special. You get the anti-aging formula plus, here's what you're getting. You're getting a book that I've had a lot of positive feedback on. In fact, I intend to do the second brand new update on it in the next 6 months called Living in the Moment Prescription for the Soul, the hardback. You're also getting a new video on how to add healthy years to your life. This would be a sequel to Age is Only a Number and How to Live Forever. This is the newest one, and this is brand new. Plus, for all of you who have pets, fish, cats, dogs, ferrets, any kind, horses, I don't care what the pet. Natural pet care. You talk about an essential book to have, and if you have friends that have pets, have the book. And so when they have a problem, no matter what, cancer, arthritis, anything, because the pets I have and the pets that are not the pets, but the animals I've rescued, they live long, long lives and are healthy. And I put all that information in this book. So you're getting a whole lot here. Living in the Moment, the hardback book, Natural Pet Care, how to add years onto your life, and, of course, the ultimate anti-aging formula. So how do you get all this? No, it's simple. You're going to call our number, and you're going to be able to get it. So, again, and I don't have a lot of it in stock. I wasn't able to get as much as I hoped for or wanted, but that's a separate issue. We will allow people 2 per person. That's the maximum I can allow now. Here's how to order it. Mind you, we've been out of this since, end of February. So it's almost 8 months. Call 877-627-5065. 877-627-5065. 877-627-5065. Now, I want to share something. We don't have any calls, or I would take them, but I want to share something concerning Dr. Margaret Hamburg. She was commissioner of the FDA from 2009 to 2015. She was appointed by Barack Obama. Forbes lists her as one of the world's 100 most powerful women multiple times. The last time was 2014. By the way, she now sits on Bill Gates' Gavi Alliance, which is the pro-vaccine, and the Gates Foundation Global Health Scientific Advisory Committee. She now serves as the Foreign Secretary for the National Academy of Medicine, and formerly she was on the boards of the Rockefeller Foundation. Her father is president emeritus of the Carnegie Corporation, so at every level she is hooked in to the established. In fact, she married the artificial intelligence expert Peter Brown, and CEO of the hedge fund Renaissance Technologies. He was the top donor to Trump's campaign with $15.5 million, and the third largest donor to Hillary Clinton was $16.5 million. He was given to both people. Here's what she was served a lawsuit, her and her husband, for allegedly between 2009 and 15, Hamburg and her husband, Peter Brown, defrauded customers and conspired with Johnson & Johnson while suppressing information about the harmful effects of two dangerous drugs, the antibiotic Levaquin and Zohadro, to profit millions of dollars by allowing the drugs to be sold on the market, causing thousands of people to die and even more to be permanently ill or disabled for life. Under her approval of Congress, she failed to disclose her husband's conflicts of interest with the drugs. The suit states, quote, while defendant Hamburg was FDA commissioner, her husband, defendant Brown's annual income, not coincidentally, increased from a reported $10 million in 2008 to an estimated $125 million in 2011 and an estimated $90 million in 2012, due in whole or in part to defendant's racketeering conspiracy to withhold information about the devastating, life-threatening, and deadly effects of Levaquin, end quote. Her husband had huge stock holdings in the pharmaceutical company, made these. Hamburg counseled the FDA to approve another dangerous pharmaceutical drug that Renaissance Technologies also owns stock in, Zohadro, despite the fact that 11 of 13 FDA advisory committee members voted 11-2 against its approval. Yet Dr. Hamburg neglected the vote and went through with approving the drug to be sold to the public. It is reported that over 5,000 people died from taking Zohadro. The side effects of Levaquin included mitochondrial toxicity, nervous system adverse events, and various multiple system disabilities relating to taking the drug, among over 15 other side effects. Also caught with Alacremes and its drug to treat addiction, Alkermes and Renaissance Technologies were given the FDA green light to rake in profits from both the sale of a highly addictive drug, then cashing in on the sale of a treatment for that drug-induced addiction. There's another case. It's alleged that Hamburg was on the board of Henry Schein, largest distributor of dental amalgam mercury filling material, and was part of the decision that the company not disclose its mercury content. This was not positioned to the majority of FDA officials who ruled in favor of disclosure. She denies her role. And she has consistently pushed for vaccination as essential. So that's something that would have given a better balance to understanding who you bring on. And typically it works this way. If you're from the establishment, and especially if you're from, let's say, the corporate Democrat establishment, anyone affiliated with Obama or Clinton, you're never questioned about your background or any controversies from your background. True or not? In this case, as I understand, is still being litigated. But what if you took everything from your background and you reviewed it, and at least that which showed conflicts or bad judgment, you then had a way of knowing, do I really want this person to be an expert in what I'm sharing with the public? That part of the story rarely, if ever, gets told. And these people are from the thousands of think tanks and corporations and foundations that are controlled by special interest groups, with teams of lawyers and lobbyists and consultants and all the tops of all the agencies. Every agency you can think of, you go from the agency where you're administering policy over to a think tank or a corporation, and you sit on a board and you get big fat checks. And as egregious as it is, it's not illegal. And yet we, the people, are trusting these people. Should we? We're out of time, everyone. I want to thank you for taking your time to listen. Look forward to sharing more tomorrow. Have a nice day.